Starfield. I've got an article up, dude, right now. People are like discussing on YouTube and having some fun. Starfield generates a sizable amount of discussion. You know, it's always funny to see people's sentiments about it. There's that article right there. It's kind of wild, but this is a bit misleading. I've already looked at this morning briefly. This is a bit misleading, and what I mean by that is this says Starfield has fallen to mostly negative on Steam. No, it hasn't. Recent reviews are mostly negative. Okay, all time it's still mixed. So if you look at Starfield, yeah, its recent reviews are mostly negative. All-time reviews are still 65% positive. It's not great, but that's better than mostly negative, right? And that's why this is a bit misleading. They need to be very careful here at Insider Gaming about the way they are titling these articles. It hasn't fallen to mostly negative on Steam. It's fallen to mostly negative recent reviews. That means the past 30 days. Yeah. So, you know, we try to be very careful here about misinformation and I try to be very careful about making sure that I mean, it's easy to do sometimes, but I think the world we live in is full of misinformation, and you know, it's important for people to fact check their stuff and be careful and make sure that you're ingesting quality factual information before you regurgitate it as well, you know. And so this right here is a bit of misinformation. It is recent reviews, mostly negative, not all time. And so let's see what they say. Starfield was released by Bethesda Game Studio on September 6th, hailed as it being a monumental, enormous open-world game with untold potential, and it was the first new IP from the firm in more than 2 decades. In interviews, it was revealed that the concept for Starfield was more than 20 years old. It took this long to develop it because Bethesda Game Studios wanted to produce the perfect game. Bit of a miss there, huh? That was the result, unfortunately. Recently, Starfield reviews dropped even lower than they already had on Steam, driven by the sentiment around the game that continues to be considerably morose. On Steam, Starfield sits with a recent review rating. Yeah, see, this should have been in the title. That is definitely clickbait. Yeah, ferret. Yeah, I agree. I think they tried to clickbait this. Starfield sits with a recent review rating of mostly negative, a jarring representation of how people feel about the spacefaring epic. Forever dwindling, Starfield was very well hyped up leading into the game's launch, because that's what developers and publishers do. They spend just as much on the project's budget for marketing and promotion to try and hype people up than they even do on the development of the game anymore. And quite often, it doesn't fulfill expectations. Yeah, unfortunately. There was a fantastic marketing campaign spearheaded by Bethesda Game Studios that took the world by storm, and by the end, more than 13 million players jumped on board with Starfield, but many of those players came away with a sour taste in their mouths, given that the product they invested in revealed itself to be far from perfect. On Steam, the game boasts over 86,000 reviews with an ultimate rating of mixed. However, the more recent feedback, which is represented by a batch of over 7,300 reviews, suggests a more miserable image, rating the game as mostly negative. One recent review referred to the game as a big cup of mediocrity, while another said it's a game that has an excess of nothingness. In a review written toward the end of November, a user wrote, "The story is as generic as it gets, and the gameplay gets boring. Few redeeming features save Starfield," and that's coming from someone who invested plenty of time in the game, completed all it had to offer, and bought into the game's Ultimate Constellation Edition. Yeah, like, I mean, this sentiment right here, buying into these Ultimate Editions and stuff, I think you got to be very, very careful nowadays. Quite often, what do you get by buying into the bigger editions, the more expensive editions and versions of games? Early access. And what do you get from early access? I know there was more for the Constellation Edition, right? There was more. But this is one of the more disgusting mechanics that I see for promoting a game and getting people to buy into the higher end versions. You get like 3 days of early access, right? And what that makes you is a final beta tester, really. And you don't really get much through most games. You're not getting much by getting in there and playing early. I think for Starfield, most people probably felt like it gave them a jump on being able to leave a negative review. You know, I mean, I think you got to be careful. We've kind of fed in for a very long time to the what these companies try to do with getting us to buy into these very expensive collector's editions or enhanced editions of games when they release, and really most of the time what you get out of it is not worth what you pay into it over the base game. A few cosmetics, you know, or some early access, and it's not worth it, dude. It's really not. But I digress, man. It's you know, we've talked a lot about Starfield, and I wasn't really all that interested in playing this myself. I really saw this more as just being a Bethesda space game, and it didn't appeal to me that much. I've liked a lot of Bethesda games in the past, you know, a lot of the Elder Scrolls stuff, Fallout stuff, but this just wasn't there for me. The marketing, promotion, and hype train didn't get me, dude. It just I've become pretty careful about letting that side of the industry work me up, and I just didn't really see it. And I feel bad for all the people that got baited. I feel bad for all the people that got baited by something that didn't fulfill expectations. But it's not the first time it's happened, and it's not going to be the last time it happens. I think, again, when we talk about the budgets that get put into these big, massive AAA games, we're talking nowadays timelines for the development of some of these games is going 5, 6, even 7 years. We're talking budgets of $500 million sometimes. And of that budget, half of that, 250 mil, isn't even going towards the development of the game at all. It's just promotion and marketing. And I think that we got to be very careful. How often do we look at trailers? Trailers get pushed out for games, and people get hyped, and all the trailer is just cinematics. And I've got articles on the YouTube page about the convolutedness of what's being done to us on that side of things in the gaming industry too, because I think that quite often trailers nowadays they try to play it off like it's gameplay, but really it's very limited gameplay, where you might be pressing a button or holding a joystick and they're like, oh yeah, this is gameplay, but it's not really gameplay. You know, I think I've seen a lot of that in some of the more, you know, a lot of the Hellblade 2 trailers, which is getting kind of worrisome for me. And I think that, you know, you want to take a look at something different, and I think we need to get closer to aligning with, take a look at like what Tango did earlier in the year with Hi-Fi Rush. They didn't promote that game. They didn't try to sell that game to us before they released it. They just they shadow dropped that game on us, right? AAA developer, right? Tango, they've done good. I fell in love with Tango with Evil Within, and I was really worried whenever I saw Hi-Fi Rush, because and while I'm absolutely a promoter of developers stepping outside of their norm, I'll admit I was worried, and I was a little bit, you know, off put by the fact that it wasn't Evil Within 3 after Ghostwire Tokyo, but they killed it. They absolutely nailed it. Hi-Fi Rush was amazing. There was no real promotion of that game. They dropped it on us. They shadow dropped it on us at a $30 price point as well. And that game was killer. And you know why so many people played it was because everybody was talking about how good it was. They didn't have to come out and go, look at everything you can do in our game. Look at how good our game. And like Bethesda's even still trying to convince people the game's good. They're going into negative reviews on Steam and trying to tell people why their game is good. Well, I'm sorry, man. It doesn't work like that. You don't get to tell people that your product's good. People that buy your product determine whether it's good or not. And obviously, as time is moving forward here, people are getting, I mean, the baseline is getting lower and lower, man, for the review process here. More and more people are coming to the conclusion that this is not what it was supposed to be, not what a lot of people's expectations of what Starfield was, and what Bethesda hyped it up to be, right? I think there's something to be said for, you know, I understand that there's you know, business is business, and I understand there's something to be said for hyping up products and getting people excited about what you're bringing to the table, but I think there's also something to be said for letting a product speak for itself. If something's good, people are going to, you know, this industry, this community, you know, all of us gamers, we communicate, man. And if something's good, people are going to find out about it, right? People are going to find out about it without a ton of promotion. Dave the Diver, I know it wasn't an indie game, all right? It shouldn't have even been nominated for Indie Game Awards at all. But there wasn't a lot of promotion behind Dave the Diver. It was early access on PC first, and then it got a full release, and that game was great, man. $20. I got like 55 hours out of that game. There was like, you know, I mean, you know, I think that I understand the business side of it, but there's also something to be said for just letting a product speak for itself. And if it's good, it'll do well. There's a reason why there's so much criticism about this game. Too much promotion, too much hype, and not enough follow through with what was promised, I think. Sums it up pretty nicely. There are people that enjoy it because it's Bethesda recipe. There are people out there with some Bethesda blinders on, I think, really enjoy this for it being Bethesda. But I think we're seeing the consensus overall, you know, review thought process here is that this isn't meeting most people's expectations. And I mean, that tells the story, doesn't it?